It's How I Make Money with Andy Beadle. So today we've got Diane Hailey. So she is one of three remaining true bed and breakfast in Roanoke, Virginia. There were four, somebody's dropped off. And she owns Roanoke Boutique Hotel, which you can find at, surprisingly enough, roanokeboutiquehotel.com. And thanks for joining us today. I know we're going to have you back again because in addition to your obsession with the B&B world, you have this really bad case of house flipping, and what I would call activist house flipping, right? I mean, watching you.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, we've been friends for a long time, especially and watching you on Facebook is great because I feel like I'm watching episodes of This Old House and don't need to turn on the TV. So it's really great stuff. But tell me a little bit. We were talking before we started taping about you had to do some recent stuff at the hotel at the B&B because you've got COVID regulations to deal with, and I think it would be useful for people to understand. You know, when you say, "Hey, we're a true bed and breakfast, we're not an Airbnb," I think that's an important distinction. I think it's a distinction and a choice that a lot of people don't understand, and it would be great for you to kind of unpack that and why you went that route.
Yeah, when I first started this process, a lot of people, told me, why don't you just do an Airbnb? You don't have to deal with bureaucracy and, you don't have inspectors coming into your house and,
Right.
you can just, keep this whole thing kind of low key. And I didn't want that. I wanted to be the real legit thing. I wanted to challenge myself. I had no idea, with, COVID that I would have these types of challenges. But, when you're up for a challenge, you're the type of person that's up for a challenge. So,
Right.
and I had that choice. I could have done this just kind of casually on the Airbnb route, but it just wasn't, I wanted to be a part of the city
Mm-hmm.
in a way that was more substantial, I've had breakfast with the mayor, type thing,
Right.
because I'm a real business owner here, and that gives me, just more cred, I guess, with my city that I've come to love. This is not my hometown, but I love it as if it was. And so I wanted to be part of the business community in a more substantial way. And it's
Right.
all worked out for the best. I have had to comply with CDC guidelines for
For everything, right?
and
Yeah.
hotel.
Right.
And so that has added a whole different layer of things. But my background, and having a master's degree, which a lot of people kind of beat up on higher ed,
Right.
right now. But that really gave me a background of being able to read CDC guidelines and interpret, the language and to go through this and have the kind of determination to finish what you started,
Oh,
when
yeah.
when you
Yeah.
you have that background of going through the thesis process.
Mhm.
A lot of people don't get through it.
Yeah.
There's, a high percentage of people who go through all the classes, but can't take that last and final thesis step to write the 100-page paper. And I got through that. And so all of those past experiences have kind of led me to this, which I guess, everybody can kind of agree that whatever you've been through has helped,
Get you to where you
guide
are.
you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, get you where you are. It's kind of a cliche, but it's true.
Well, and I think one of the things and that's a great point that's underrated, is the ability to find a big project and stick with it, when it just requires a lot of unsexy, grindy
Right.
details. Now, but I mean, you're truly rehabbing buildings. It's not like you bought this beautiful home and were like, "Oh, I'm going to make it in an Airbnb." I mean, you are down in it, and you're managing all of that work yourself too, right? Is that correct? I have that because every
Right.
time I see you, you're like breaking out a new, you got a new tool or a new project that you're doing. Like, all right, this week I'm learning how to pour concrete, right? And going from there.
Yeah, general contracting, you're the boss.
Right.
You have to identify the solutions to all the problems. And that's life. Life is about finding solutions to the problem at hand. And so all my general contracting work through the years, which I've done for a long time, was part of, where I am today and being able to identify exactly what the problem is. Some
Right.
people really can't, they know there's a problem, but they really can't really drill down to what the real problem is. And so if you don't have the right tool for the problem, you're not going to get anywhere. So contracting work, and all of that has been a part of this process.
Now, did you find the space and then decide, hey, I think this would be a great B&B and I'm looking for something to suffer through for a few years? Or did you decide you were going to do it? Like, how did the whole thing work out, and how did you end up picking the property and deciding to go through with all that?
Well, I'm always looking to suffer, that's for sure. And so, in Roanoke, and probably, every town, even my own kind of hometown, Stanton, had that neighborhood when I was younger, which was downtown.
Right.
There was a time when I was young living there, you didn't want to live on Beverly Street. Now Beverly Street's hip. Everybody wants to be right there in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I moved here and had the opportunity to come to Old Southwest, which is the historic neighborhood of
Right.
this town, Roanoke, that's undervalued and had been neglected for many years, kind of a case study of urban decay,
Right. Yeah.
decades. I had the opportunity to solve some problems, and I wasn't afraid to, buy the dilapidated houses, and fix them up. And also another part of that is my first house here was a duplex.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
when I purchased it, I had the option of evicting the tenants.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not who I am or what I wanted to do. So they lived upstairs. And so they were apartment B, I was apartment A. And I said, you could just stay as long as you need to, I'm not going to kick you out just because I bought the house. And they were cool. They were like, well, we're planning on, buying in a year. And so they were after the American dream. They were actually Nepali Bhutanese refugees.
Oh, wow.
And so they were here really seeking out the American dream, very hard workers. And so they lived upstairs for 8 months. And so that was really my first experience with living in a house with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And not really an apartment or, a house. And so I think that factored into being comfortable with thinking about household density,
Right.
Right. Of there are other people that are, here, and income producing, of course, I have to make a living.
Right.
And so I had to look at it from that way too. And so they had moved out and bought their house. And so I kind of flipped that house and made it back into a single family and did all that. And so when I came down the street, because I'd always passed this house. This house was the spooky, scary,
Right.
haunted house of the neighborhood, probably one of the worst ones in this neighborhood.
Yeah, I remember when you bought it and thinking, good God, right?
Yeah.
And really wondering, is she just going to tear it down? And
Right.
which I know is not your vibe at all. I mean, you will go out of your way, so.
And it probably would have and should have been torn down. But because this is a federal H2 historic district, you can't tear these houses down.
Right.
I mean, they half burn away, but the Historic Society and the Architectural Review Board, as it's called, you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so these houses have to be saved, which is really what makes this neighborhood special. And I'm glad they got the historic designation. It's a lot of red tape, to take on a project like this anywhere is a challenge.
Right.
But to take it on in a historic neighborhood is even more of a challenge, because everything you do, you have to ask permission.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go through a process. You have to apply. You have to go before the board, which in itself is very intimidating.
Right.
You're in council chambers in front of, and on live,
Right.
TV, and they can tell no. They can say,
Right.
no, we don't want you to do that, but we don't want you to do this. And they're very well intentioned. One of the problems with the historic, their intention is not for you to do things within your budget. They really don't care what your budget is.
Right. Right.
Money is
Sure.
not an issue for them. if you say, I'd love to do what you're doing and replace those corbels and do that, what you see on HGTV and all that,
Right.
but I can't afford to do that. That is not their problem.
Mm-hmm.
They are
Sure.
there to maintain and preserve the integrity of the home. And kind of what their thing is like, well, if you can't afford it, why'd you buy it?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah.
you should have done your research. You should have done your due diligence and known that, you're going to have to do these pretty expensive things.
Right.
And so working around all that, so it's not for the faint of heart, or the faint of pocketbook either.
Well, tell me a
so
little
that
bit.
was,
Yeah, when you got started, how did it's the spooky house, the haunted house, the ugly duckling on the street. What was the process like before you dove all the way in and you were committed? I mean, how much due diligence and research could you do? I'm sure there were surprises. I'd love to hear about that process.
well, I had really worked on buying this house for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it, I wanted it. I located the man who owned it. I tracked him down. The house had been boarded up and condemned, I think, for 7 years at that point, because I knew, I could kind of research that through the city.
Yeah.
And I just I tracked him down basically at the restaurant that I found out. I was like an FBI agent, he had lunch at Paul's every Saturday. So there he was. With all the company, they're all like 120 years old, and and it really was kind of all of the slumlords of Roanoke sitting around this table. It was something out of a movie. So I sat down and I introduced myself and I said, I really want to buy that house, over on Day. And he was like, oh no, no, that's it. You can't afford that. And I was like, I didn't, and he's one of these people, and he was also he was from Greece. He had his parent. He was first generation American. His parents had immigrated here, and so a lot of his friends around the table were also Greek, and so he was speaking Greek with his friends, and I could tell they were like, "Oh, sell her the house, come on, come on." So they were all having a good time with it. So I ended up having lunch there with the guys on Saturdays, kind of trying to wear him down. He knew that. He knew I was showing up to have lunch and talk to people at the house. Because for someone like me, and to do this, you have to be obsessed with things. Yeah. And so I would say that eating lunch on Saturdays at this table is not a normal thing that a normal person would do. With the end result being, I'm gonna buy this house, right? And so I know I'm a little strange. That's most women my age are shopping and getting their nails done, and,
right?
So anyway, probably after about 9 or 10 months, we're all sitting there, and he goes, "I tell you what, Diane, you can buy it when I'm dead." And I was like, "All right, wow. I mean, if that's how you want to do it, let's all do it."
Ouch!
And 2 months later, he passed away. And sure enough,
oh Lord,
his estate lawyer contacted me, called me, and he said, my client said that you were, and he said, there's a list of people who, it's a great house, beautiful.
It's a beautiful house. Yeah, I've driven by it. Yeah.
So I wasn't the only person in town who recognized that, So, but he said, well, my client wanted you to have rights of first refusal. He said, run over there. You've got 10 minutes. Make us an offer.
No
So
kidding.
Literally, it was awful. It was horrible. So I had 10 minutes. And so there was a man with a key on the porch. He wouldn't even come in, you know. So I ran through the house.
Because this house has been literally boarded up for 8 years at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was horrific. But, the critters had taken over. So there were, animals, it was horrifying.
Oh, God.
So I came out and I offered 10,000.
Right.
And I called him. I was like, I'll give you 10,000. And that was like, it should have been like $1.
Right. You pay me to take it off your hands. Yeah. Right.
So he's on the phone. I don't know how he came up with it, but he said, "We'll tell you what, we'll do 19.5." And that was kind of a random number. And so literally I had 30 seconds to say yes or no. Cause he was like, I'm going to cross you off,
Right.
yes or no.
Yeah.
I'm going to the next person on the list. He didn't care. Nobody had emotional attachment.
Right.
So I said, sure, I'll take it. So I wrote a check and owned a house,
Wow.
and yeah. And then that started, I went to, then it was a hometown bank, which is a small bank,
Right.
and said, I've done this thing. And so they knew me from, previous projects.
Mm-hmm.
And so they trusted me. They knew that, not so much I knew what I was doing, but I knew the people,
Right.
I could be trusted with a project. It wasn't like I was walking just off the street.
Right.
They were familiar with my tenacity.
Well, and they probably knew you're the kind of person who would die before not paying back a loan, and I think that probably came through to them pretty clearly.
Yeah, I would totally be in line at the plasma center to sell my plasma before I would not pay.
Right.
Pay.
Wow.
And so then at that point, once you're in, then the bank is right. The bank, they would visit me. They just wanted to see, they were interested, and they as a small bank, as a truly kind of Roanoke bank as it was, they thought what I was doing was cool, and they liked being, bankrolling me to do these projects for this little neighborhood that could be so cool. So yeah, then they were like, "Come on, Diane," because at that point you got to get done. You got to make it income producing in some way.
Yep.
And they knew I would rent it or do something that would pay for itself, because they knew that was kind of my thing.
Right.
And so then I had the choice between rent it, Airbnb it, or real bed and breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
And I just decided just to shoot for the moon and do the real B&B and go through all of that process, which it was a lot. It's getting an ABC license it's a big
non-trivial.
deal.
Yeah.
The state of Virginia says, we'll give you it's a real feather in your cap, because they do a real colonoscopy on you.
Yeah.
Well,
and I think a thing that Airbnb kind of strangely allowed for a lot of people was this, I'm going to monetize this property or whatever, but and not to kind of get into that whole controversy, but there's something about owning a hotel that to me just bespeaks a different type of project, if you would. And it's a brand and an experience and a thing that you devote a lot of time and craft to. And then there's all the regulatory stuff, right? You've got health code for a hotel, you got health code for a restaurant, like you've said, you've got ABC license. And I mean, and I remember watching the photos of the build, as you tore stuff down, encountered new thing. I mean, it was one of those things where you kind of think, man, thank God somebody out there is doing this, because it's entertaining as hell to watch, but good Lord, what a glutton for punishment. But you just gutted through it, man. I mean,
you start tearing out walls of a historic home, and you really know, and you start looking at the engineering, and you could think, man, if somebody doesn't know what they're doing, this house, it could fall down on you. The house could have killed me.
Yeah.
But, at this point in the game, a house isn't going to kill me.
Right.
So,
either that or it's just your time.
But, it was not my time yet, because there were several opportunities in this house. This is a big old house, and it's balloon framed, which, it's, that's how they used to do it. And so there's some center walls in here. That the whole thing could put, but it's a tank. It's 13 inches of brick wall. This is the structure of the house. It's like Monticello. It's real brick. And so I'm glad I saved it. It was worth saving. All these houses here were saving. I'm a big fan of the historic homes, probably from growing up near Stanton and admiring those old houses and having seen, and a lot of people will say that, Old Town Alexandria, Savannah, the towns that have that quaint historic neighborhood. There are people that dig it and people that want the cul-de-sac and the new construction,
Right.
So.
No, I hear you. Well, so when you were doing all this, were you doing other work, or was this like you had your rental and that was it, or were you kind of balancing a bunch of different stuff at one time?
The big balance was, was the year before getting it,
Mm-hmm.
because I really had to hustle that year. I worked 3 or 4 jobs. I was cleaning offices downtown on nights, on weekends, and working a retail job, um, and substitute teaching, and just really hustling. That
Right.
was really my hustle year. And and when you're in that momentum of really um, earning and stocking it away, because you have a real purpose with that money, because I knew it was coming. I knew that eventually I just, I knew I was going to get this house.
Right. Right.
I needed money in my pocket to make it all happen. That was the problem. And the solution for me was just a lot of long hours and hard work, because even though I have a master's degree, it's not a money master's. It's a
Right.
master's in teaching,
Right. Yeah.
and teachers don't make money. If
Yep.
I had, years and years ago when I became licensed, just become a teacher and just taught, I'd have an apartment somewhere.
Sure.
It's you
Yeah.
you can't bankroll a project like this on a teacher's salary, which is very sad.
Mm-hmm.
But so I couldn't rely on a $50 an hour job. I had to work multiple, $15 an hour jobs,
Right.
and just work twice as much, frankly,
Sure.
because, um, so I worked 7 days a week, and I wasn't above, cleaning offices and cleaning bathrooms, which again, I'm not above it now. I'm a
Right.
maid now and a
Right.
bed and breakfast. So
Right. Right. Yeah.
here we go. Yeah, it's kind of, um, training. So, and I really had to socially, I guess, you know, come down the ladder of doing just kind of menial jobs, but I had a purpose.
Right.
I read I read something on a mug or something that said, once you ruin your reputation, you can live freely.
Right.
And so it was a very freeing experience, because I could
Right.
just be, oh yeah, what do you want me to do?
Right.
Whatever for a buck, because once I was done then. But it was a very freeing experience, and I
Yeah.
was really free to just earn with this goal in mind.
Well, and you
So
you
yeah,
have
I always
I mean, to say you have a passion for these type of projects would be to underestimate what I think a lot of people think passion really is, um, because they are,
yeah, yeah,
it's not sexy. I mean,
no, no,
it's hard work, and if you can't take pride in, all right, man, I laid a perfect gravel bed today, right? I mean, but knowing that the end result is I'm gonna own a bed and breakfast, and I'm gonna be the proprietor, and I'm gonna do all that. Like, it's a weird, it's not weird, but it's one of these things I think people talk a lot about. Oh, you got to have passion, this, that, and the other, and passion is in really, I think, short supply, and it's unusual. So when you find it, you got to grab hold of it. And I've watched you do these projects from a distance, and it's just been like, man, she must love this. Either that or the CIA has something on her, and they're like, we're going to release it unless you rehab this house, which would be a weird movie, but
the CIA has nothing, because if the ABC guys, special agents, who did their research on me, didn't find anything,
if they didn't
I'm
find
so
it, the
pleased.
CIA's not going to find it. Yeah, right. There you go.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, it is. Having special agents show up, because they do surprise inspections.
Right.
You see that this black SUV pulls up in front of my house and comes up, and they have a gun. They have a sidearm and
Right.
a badge. And then sometimes I'm like, oh my God, what have I done?
Right,
And then it's
right.
like, oh yeah, it's just my ABC agent.
Right.
So,
Right. Oh my God.
but yeah, so I guess, yeah, and people don't understand what it kind of takes when you don't have that trust fund. I didn't have a
Mhm.
trust fund.
Sure.
And people kind of assume, oh, her dad must have died, or, or she was left something from a rich uncle. And I think people don't want to believe that I cleaned offices at night on weekends in downtown Roanoke to earn my spot here. People want to believe that I got some big settlement in a divorce,
Right.
and it, you know, and it's just not true. I worked hard to be here, and I earned my stories, and I love having the B&B because people do ask, "Hey, how'd you end up owning a B&B?"
Right. Right.
I think they assume that I would say, "Oh yeah, when I got divorced, I got this huge check and bought this home," as you know.
Right.
And
Right.
when they start hearing, I worked really hard for this, and I general contracted it, and I literally unloaded all the lumber that is in this house,
Mm-hmm.
um, and and I could see the cognitive dissonance in their minds, especially for the wife,
Right.
that she's, you didn't know, like she's trying to figure out like what, like I could just see her like
Right.
what do you like um because it's very strange,
Yeah.
what I did, and
Well,
it was like a movie almost, but it's true. You
yeah.
can't make this up. Like,
No one would willingly be this dumb. Yeah. No, I hear you.
yeah, bats chasing me out of here because the bats.
Right.
There's a whole story around the bats that lived in the attic and evicting the bat. I mean, when I think back at that, being chased, I was chased out of the house numerous times by the bats because they would get annoyed with me,
Oh my
because
God.
I would be, in the middle of the night,
Right.
working on some, and the few that would be left behind, or if they were leaving or coming back in, that's when they're all stirred up. So yeah, there's just crazy stories.
And they're pissed. I think people look at that and say, "Oh, she must have, had a trust fund or a settlement or whatever," because I think it's very hard for a lot of folks to want something that badly,
Hmm.
and then be. And I mean, we've been friends for a while, and you have always been somebody who championed the value of hard work. I mean, for its own sake, but also because that's how you get the things that you want and that make your life better and make your community's life better. And a lot of folks see success and they think, oh, they're lucky or they're not talented. I remember talking to my wife, Gretchen, who we were talking about Miley Cyrus one day, and she was just saying something. Oh yeah, I don't, is she really? I said that woman is phenomenally talented,
Yes,
and
she is.
she works very, very hard. And what you are seeing now is a product that has been crafted for sale by a consummate artist who has worked
Mm,
her ass off.
right.
And I think we see the silly parts, and we see whatever we like or don't like or admire, and we go, well, I don't. I don't know that I ever care about anything that much. And maybe more to the point, I'm afraid that if I went down that road, I would fail.
Hmm.
What happens if I reach the project that I can't go to the board one more. I can't do an architecture. What if they don't approve my plan? I don't have the money, all that. And I think people have trouble saying to themselves, yeah, I could master that fear, right? So they have to have a story for why it was easier than that, you know? Um,
Yeah, I mean, stepping off a cliff kind of on a daily basis, and you hear about artists who have horrible stage fright,
right.
you know, and, where every concert they almost didn't go on stage. And it's hard for us to believe that somebody that talented, like, would have that.
Yeah.
And the reason that they're successful is they overcame that fear
Hmm.
and step off that cliff all the time, not just once, um, but consistently,
Yeah.
consistency is the key.
Well, and watching you from a distance do these projects, that's one of the things that I found that I think is the cognitive disconnect for a lot of people. And I can't speak to being the wife in a relationship, but I totally get where you're coming from. Where watching you run up against obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, and just be like, all right, well, I guess I'm about to learn something new this week. That's an approach that I think a lot of people don't. And it's not. I mean, you're a mom. I mean, you
Mhm.
got a family to raise. You're a normal person. Sort of. Yeah.
Sort of.
On paper, you're a normal person, but right to watch that and see that attitude of, well, hey, okay, I guess I can't wait to see what happens next. I bet it'll be interesting. I think a lot of people have trouble really, if I dare say it, agreeing that they could have that life. Right. I mean, it's something that, I've been doing this for 23 years now. And, it's not easy, but I wouldn't do anything else. And you have bad days and good days, and you have times where you're like, wait a minute, where you're glad you've got an advanced degree to read through a federal form. And so I think a lot of people look at that and they go, yeah, wow, that's scary,
Mm-hmm. And, another part of what kind of formed this experience is, when I was married, I was married to a person who was at heart a delegator.
Right.
His one true talent was delegating away, everything. And so you have to be a doer. And that made me a doer because I got delegated the kids, delegated the house, which, if there was a leaky faucet, it got delegated to me because he truly was a delegator. He was that guy that, just kind of surrounded himself with people who would, do what he asked. And so unfortunately for him, that made me see the person I didn't want to be. So when I started flipping, I knew I wanted to do most of the work. Anything I could do, I did. Not just because it saved me a ton of money, but because it makes me feel good as a person to be a doer. Because someone who's truly a delegator and delegates everything, I could see that there was no pride in that.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
And so that's something that I have always been just pretty adamant about. If I'm not doing it, I want to be a part of it. And so that has not only taught me over these many years of how to do stuff, because a lot of people are like, how do you know what to do?
Right.
How do you, and it would be like, well, years ago, I did watch a guy do it.
Right.
But then I learned, and then I could, and so,
being
a lifelong learner, but with a purpose of, I don't want to delegate that away anymore. I want to have it where I can do it, because I kind of went through that. And so, just to be a doer yourself, and I think, as a woman business owner, a lot of women kind of take pride actually and say, oh, I just write a check.
Right.
Oh, if I need something done, Diane, just write a check.
Right.
And to me, that makes me feel uncomfortable. Like what? Just, change out a toilet. You can change out a toilet standing on your head. You can't, and they look at me like, you can change out. I'm like, I've changed out 4 or 5 toilets. It's really easy. It's just a waxing and you level it, and they just think that's crazy. They think it's crazy because, once upon a time, I was a housewife, and so, it's, to grow from, and there's nothing wrong with being a housewife. That's a lot of hard work.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But I just wanted to do this other thing, and I'm still a housewife as a bed and breakfast owner. I'm a cook and a maid,
right.
a whole different level.
Right.
I'm a housewife, but I made it where it produced income. And I live in a home that I could have never had as a teacher. It's afforded me the ability to live in a beautiful space and to share that.
Right.
And to bring people to the city, to downtown where I love, where I can say, they will say, well, where should we go out to eat tonight? And it makes me feel good to send them to my friends' businesses.
Right. Yeah.
Go to
Absolutely.
Go to Table 50.
Yeah.
Go down to Jack Brown's. I love Aaron.
Right.
I love being able to send my affluent guests downtown to spend money with my friends and to create that synergy and how the money can flow. It's it's been a really, really fulfilling experience.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, I think too that there are so many different ways to be in business, and we've got, a lot of clients who, pride themselves on having built a very scalable, growing business model that involves pretty much nothing but delegation, and they do great and do their thing. I think there are a lot of people out there, myself included, who enjoy the mastery of a craft,
Mm-hmm.
or a bunch of crafts. Because there was a great book, and I can't remember the author, called Shop Class as Soul Craft, written several years ago, that was a great kind of addressing some of the kind of feelings of dissatisfaction that people have, especially in the knowledge economy, where if you're a developer, you're writing code, and that is definitely a craft, and there's a lot of that great feedback accomplishment loop. But to have the types of skills that you have, they are utterly and completely non-perishable, right? My youngest went to UVA, and while he was there, he was a full-time cook, and on the line up at a place called Oak Social up in Charlottesville. And I used to joke with him. I said, regardless of what happens with your degree, you can always work illegally anywhere in the world. And
Yes.
so, right. And so those kinds of long-term skills, I think, in addition to having some marketability and they can be monetized, I think they give they're frustrating to get them and to build the skill, but it's extremely satisfying to know that you can solve problems. I'm scared to think
And
of what
hard to know how to wait tables.
I'm part what again?
And I said it doesn't hurt to know how to wait tables because,
Yeah. Yeah.
the restaurant business, I mean, there's, I waited tables for a summer a few years ago,
Yeah.
So, those skills don't hurt.
Yeah.
And this, the service, being in the service of others
Mm-hmm.
and being able to monetize that is, I have a lot of gratitude, and I think that comes from serving others. As a B&B owner and operator,
Mm-hmm.
This is service. I feed people, I wait the tables and clean for them and do all of this. And so it does give you a sense of gratitude, which is, I never think that I'm deserving,
Sure.
because if you think you're deserving of something, you can't really fully be grateful for it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because you deserve it. So anytime someone in my own kids, my oldest, he came through, as a teenager, he worked in the restaurant industry, and I knew he'd be okay.
Right.
I always knew he'd be, once he was a line cook. And so once he worked, a year in the restaurant industry, I knew he was going to be okay.
Right. That's so true. Well, and I think one of the things about you in particular is that this is a method, this is a business where you seem to live in a way that's extremely congruent with your values, right? I mean, you are doing what you want to do in the way you want to do it, and for the reasons you want to. And I think that's pretty rare. Another reason why people go, "Oh, she must have just stroked a check," right? To kind of make that story be a little more whatever palatable from the standpoint of, well, okay, well, how are you standing up against the things you care about? I think that's important. So now is the bulk of your income coming from rental in the B&B? What do you got going on now?
Yeah, I mean, this year has been interesting, and again, glad I didn't go the Airbnb route because to make that a full-time income, because I'm a real bed and breakfast, I have been able to apply for some grants and the disaster loans, and I am a small business that someone's trying to keep afloat and late and all of that. And so that has been helpful, which I couldn't have got if I was an Airbnb. If you have an Airbnb, you can't apply for a loan or a grant, and so that has been helpful. And just, frugal lifestyle, is always helpful. And so, but yeah, this year has been challenging. but yeah, all of my income comes from, I'm a full-time bed and breakfast owner.
Right. Now, have
And
bookings picked
so
back up at all, or are you getting some?
October, I could tell that I guess people were fatigued of being in because
Right.
they were here, in
Mm-hmm.
October, a great month to travel and to see the Parkway,
Especially here,
being
yeah.
a couple of miles from the Blue Ridge Parkway and the Appalachian Trail, that's, the outdoor market they're my people. And
Mm-hmm.
so the outdoorsy people are still coming outdoors.
Right.
I just had a lady this weekend from Northern Virginia who came down to hike. And those are my people, the people in Northern Virginia, or the people that are coming through here to get to Asheville, coming through here out to Gatlinburg, so those are the people that I kind of am able to market to. And they see my website and they get my vibe. And so they feel
Right.
very comfortable. I'm not an afternoon tea kind of girl. I'm an afternoon hike. I'm an afternoon hike kind of girl. And so they kind of can pick up on the fact that they can come here and I'll put them on the right trails.
Right.
They don't have to spend their wheels looking for, a really good hike. I'm going to know where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are still coming. I wasn't shut down completely. I did have to go to 50% occupancy
Mm-hmm.
for a while. But the government didn't shut me down. The virus is shutting me down, is shutting me down.
Yeah.
It's fear, and so, I've got some people coming, for the holidays, for Christmas, to see other families. So they're coming to stay here, but to do some, outdoor visits with family. And so that's okay. And so now I'm just hoping, just like everybody else, hoping for a good spring. And for my business, you can't make up time.
Right.
Once a night is passed with no head in the bed, they call it,
Mm-hmm.
I can't make up for that, for me time. A restaurant can be slow on a Thursday, but do better on a Friday and kind of make up that income. I can't do that because I can't increase my, occupancy.
Right.
So the hotel business, as you see hotels closing, and as, one of my fellow B&Bs here in Roanoke closed, that's part of why this industry hurts maybe a little worse than others, because you can't turn back time.
Right. Right.
Once that night of business is gone, it's gone forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an interesting, I hadn't known much about this industry before I got into this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's interesting seeing how it all works.
So what's, once we're through all of this, what's your next project? Gonna buy the next house, the house next door?
No. I mean, I'd love to. Let me know if you hear coming on the market. No.
There you go.
I tried a couple of years ago, my little carriage house project.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember carriage house. So I had tried to kind of work my way around having a large amount of overhead at a project that takes a long time to get income, right? You want to put as little money as possible, and I guess, not really, but I overspend, but in theory, and then start producing income. So in my little mind, I thought, oh, a tiny house, a carriage house, because all of these historic homes, or not all of them, but a lot of them have these cute little carriage houses in the back.
Sure, yeah.
So I had found an empty lot here in the historic neighborhood, actually really closer to downtown.
Oh wow! Okay.
A couple blocks downtown, and the original house in the front, the main structure, had burned, and so it was just the carriage house in the back. So I bought the lot in the carriage house, hoping to renovate the carriage house, get a tenant, then build up some income, and then build the main house.
Right.
So in my mind, sounds good, come on. So the city didn't think so.
Okay.
So I really and the city loves me. And for my last name not to be a Roanoke last name, and I didn't grow up here, and I just went to college down here and stayed.
Right.
The city of Roanoke has really just been there for me, in just being open to my ideas. So this time they weren't so open to it. So they were like, Diane, you can't do this. We don't want to see the carriage house on the lot by itself.
Right.
But I stabilized it because it was leaning and almost falling down on the roof. I had to put the new roof on it. So I stabilized it. I got it to where somebody else could, without as much vision as I have, that at least they could see the vision.
Right.
And so I lost money on that project, and so that was a good learning experience. You shouldn't be successful all the time. You have to have some failure. So that's how I think about it.
There you go.
So in that failure, though, I ended up selling not only the lot, but the idea, my dream, to one of the top contractors, a real GC in Roanoke who does beautiful work in the nicest neighborhoods.
Right.
And, build the main house, and then you could have this carriage house in the back that you can see, now I've kind of buffed it up a little bit, how cool it could be. And so he bought it. So I am anxious to see what he is going to end up doing there that I couldn't have done. I just didn't have that bankroll.
Yeah.
I have to play with my numbers.
Right.
And he does. So I'm actually enjoying kind of being a spectator. And, whenever I see his equipment and they're almost ready to break, I think they'll break ground in the spring.
Oh, you think? Okay.
I'm super excited to see what they do because I kind of had a hand in it. So
you gave your idea off to somebody else.
Yeah, that's fine. I have no ego in it.
No, I hear you. I hear you. Well, in the city, it's hard when you talk to people, who are inspecting or doing the zoning and all that, because you just want to be done. And then they're like, hey, you got to reassess this. And, it's easy to get frustrated, but at least in my experience, all of those people, one, they're trying to do the job within the limits of the framework they've been given. And number two, they've seen a lot of stuff. And when you step way outside the playbook, there are often good reasons for why the playbook is the way it is,
Right,
and so,
yes.
So they're like, and at least my experience has always been, people have been very positive and at least willing to explain themselves, when they've said no to something. So,
and they were right, because it's called infill, with a downtown neighborhood like this, you want every lot to have a house,
right?
That creates the population density, and then those people go downtown and eat dinner, and so a good city, you don't have empty lots,
right? And
so they shut me down, because they knew it would take years for me to build that main house,
right?
And it wasn't a good fit for me. And they're big picture thinkers. These are people who, have their education in planning, which planning is, by definition, they're looking out 50 years,
right?
They're not thinking, well, Diane wants to do this cute little project, but they knew it wasn't in the books for me.
Right.
And they did me a favor, really, because, I don't need to be running a B&B and then, renovating the carriage house. So it all turned out for the best.
Sure.
But you have to have that kind of attitude that it's not just about you when you buy into a historic neighborhood in a community like this. I'm not trying to do my thing out in the county somewhere,
right.
Where you can kind of, ride your horse into town kind of thing. It's a social contract.
Right.
And so, growing up, I never thought I would be, I thought I was more libertarian than that, but I really have kind of changed, and I bought into the whole social contract thing where I enjoy being a part of this community, and I truly want the best for it. So if the city tells me this project is not for you. We're shutting you down. And they put a stop work order on me.
Right.
I've never had a stop work order in my life. But
Right.
they put it on me. And it's kind of cool, actually. But but I got my stop work order, and they stopped my work. I mean, it was a real thing,
Right.
And so they were like, we know what you're trying to do, and it's not a bad idea, but you can't finish out this project. And I had to soul search and go, you know what? They're right.
Right.
I don't have $200,000 right now to build a brand new house, even though that would be super cool and fun.
Yeah.
I can't do it. So I sold it.
Yep.
And then I moved on, and it's another part of it's another chapter of the book.
Well, and entrepreneurs are people who, by and large, I think have way more ideas than there are time and resources to execute.
Yeah.
And
right.
And you have to be okay with that. Yeah. You have to be fine with that. So
I'm not a one-trick pony, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
And I'll find something else cool. An entrepreneur has a lot of hope, a lot of ideas, and an attitude that you kind of just cut your losses and move on. You can't just dwell. I don't lay in bed at night thinking what could have been. That little child. Yeah, I don't think that way. I'm happy. I'm happy for Matt, who bought it, and he's going to do awesome stuff. And I'm happy to just watch.
Right.
So
I love it. I love it. All right, we're down to our final two questions. Here we go.
Ooh, okay.
If you could have a meal with any living public figure, who would it be, and what would the meal be?
Right now I'm just in a point where I'm loving these really gutsy entrepreneurial ladies. So it's got to be Betty White or, Dolly Parton.
Oh,
all
right. You got to choose. You got to choose one. You got to choose one.
Well, I'm going to go with Dolly because this whole thing with the vaccine. Are you kidding me? She just gave away like 100 million books to kids, and she funded a vaccine.
Yeah.
And she's awesome, and she's super talented.
I have this. I believe that when she passes away, we are going to have heard maybe 1/20th of her story. Right. And because her generosity and just how ferociously smart she is in deploying that. Yeah. Rock star. Country star. Sorry. She's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Amazing person.
And seems like a nice person and no controversy and, so I'd love to just be in her presence. And I'm sure has sage wisdom, and all of this kind of thing, and would be generous with it because, I could have dinner with Warren Buffett, but he ain't giving me no tips, he would not, he would just tell me to save my nickels or something,
Right.
I don't know. I don't feel like, those old guys would be generous, but I feel like Dolly would, and Betty probably would too, but.
Agreed. Yeah.
And so I would take Dolly downtown Roanoke, and we would walk around and I would show her my town. And I bet she'd love it. I bet she'd love it here.
I love it. I bet she would. Absolutely. And Dolly Parton just as really, and this is not a term I use very much, but as a role model to anyone who's had any kind of success.
Yes.
In terms of how you think about your work in a broader sense than maybe what made you your first nickel. And then number two, she is definitely a woman who thought about her community, then thought about the larger community. And now she kind of started, if you will, started with Roanoke, went to Virginia, and now she's thinking national and global and just seamlessly doing it. Yeah. Unbelievable and incredible human being and entrepreneur. So I love that answer. Absolutely wonderful. If you could give somebody who was starting out on their own, and they've decided, hey, I want to be responsible. I want to start a business and, it's going to be on me. What one piece of advice as they got started would you offer?
You have to get up every morning at 5 a.m. without fail. Um, and that is a consistent, and you don't even have to go like to a gym or anything.
Right.
That's great. For me, a whole other story is how physically I was able, as a 45, 50-year-old woman, to do these projects. I'm not 20 years old, but what it took for me to prepare myself and train myself physically to take this on, which was a huge part of it,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
you know, um, is a whole different another side of it. You can't be strong mentally unless you're strong physically, in my opinion. And I
Mm-hmm.
know others will lambaste me for saying that, but I believe that,
Right. Sure.
and getting up at 5 a.m., you can't sleep until even 9, in my opinion, and be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be up early. You've got to, drink your coffee or your tea or do your meditation or do your sit-ups or do your push-ups or whatever, and you've got to get the juice. There aren't enough hours in the day
Right.
to be successful, period. And to sleep away 4 of those hours, you're just setting yourself up for failure, because you can't go back in time again.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of wasted that time. So, during that year that I was really getting pumped up for the project, working a ton of jobs, sleeping very little, still working out, I
Right.
mean, that was a part of that. I would get my hour in the gym in as sacred, that gave me the momentum, because with a person physically, there's a physical momentum, just like in physics, like the ball rolling,
Right.
and you can't stand still and then take off,
Yeah.
you have, you know? So, I mean, just, for anybody, and I just had, actually, and it comes to mind because I just had this conversation with one of my teenagers who's about to be an adult, and and trying to wake him up this morning, and I told him the same thing. I was like, you cannot sleep away the day and be successful. You
Mm-hmm.
have to get up early. And of course the teenager's like, oh, what,
Right.
get out of
Right.
my room. But that's served me well, and it still
Love it.
does,
Yeah.
still.
Yeah. I have a friend who grew up on a farm in Kansas, and he's a financial advisor, and he talks about growing up out there, a big place. And at 4:45 every morning, his dad would yell up the stairs, "Work!" and that was their wake up
Yeah.
call. I was like, "Oh my god!" But yeah, I hear you, and I think there's a lot of value in being very conscious about your time. And I know,
Mhm.
from personal experience, when you own a business and you're living life and doing what you do, you get these setbacks. And, I will go ahead and say, a setback, losing a client, or losing losing the ability to do this project you were going to do on the place, or what have you, or having bookings dry up, is a little, that's a little more of a gut check and an emotional moment than I had a bad meeting at work,
Right.
or I had a bad employee review or something. And not to speak ill of having a job, but unless you are always thinking about that, what have I done today for my body? What have I done today for my relationships? What have I done today for my business? What have I done today for myself, so to speak? It's easy to lose sight of that, and then you end up in terrible shape and not getting the work done, and then you're slowed down, and this, that, and the other. So I think that's great advice, and I think there are a lot of people who would agree with you, that being up and at it before the sun is really the way to go, and maintaining the ability. I can't remember who it is, but the great phrase is protect the asset, and you're the
Yeah.
asset. Right.
Right.
And you got to do that. So I love it. Again, Diane Hailey, RoanokeBoutiqueHotel.com. Get their book there, and she will tell you all the great hikes to have. And I do believe Roanoke does have the largest, is it the greatest number of miles of mountain biking trail in the city limits of any city in the East? Is that right?
Trail system. Now, if you count it, Carvin's Cove is our mountain biking, and it's
Right.
a level IMBA trail system, and
Yeah.
it's the only one east of the Mississippi.
Yeah.
So between, and I do have people come here just for the Greenway. So So yeah, lots of trails.
And this is a great
Lots of
place.
fun.
I mean, we've got great food, getting better all the time. You know, God willing, we get through all this COVID stuff, and that continues to flourish. We got the mountain biking scene. We've got hiking, amazing hiking, Appalachian Trail, Blue Ridge Parkway, fly fishing. I mean, it's a fantastic destination, and I think having people like you in town who can kind of create that experience is really huge for Roanoke. So thanks for all that you do.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you, Andy.
All right. Talk to you soon. Take care, Diane. Thanks for joining us. You can find contact information about our guest in the show notes for this episode. This has been the How I Make Money podcast by Brand Distillers. To learn more, visit branddistillers.com.